Good day. Welcome to another episode of Monday ReTsene with Pretoria Psychologists. My name is Makau, and I will be talking about understanding mental illness. This topic comes at a very important time where we are seeing the increase in numbers of people who are battling with mental illnesses, and sometimes people just don't know what mental illness is. This then further perpetuates the stigmas and the judgment against people who live and battle with mental illness. So what is mental illness? Mental illness includes a wide range of conditions that severely affect one's mood, thinking, and behavior. One might ask, how do these conditions affect the following? These conditions affect a person's mood in that a person all of a sudden feels very low, very sad, demotivated, and sometimes helpless. They affect a person's thinking in that the person's thinking is disorganized, person can't concentrate, and they're just feeling guilty all of a sudden. With regards to behavior, this is very sudden. A person does not enjoy the things that they used to enjoy anymore. They are feeling, like I mentioned earlier on, demotivated. They don't want to eat, or maybe they eat too much, sleepless, or sleep more than they usually would do. So it's quite important that a person observes these three things and see if they are still acting within the normal range. So it's very important for us to understand that mental illness is associated with distress and or problems in functioning in daily life. Mental illness affects and interrupts relationships because all of a sudden, remember, the person's behavior has changed. People around the person don't understand what is happening anymore. Hence why there's a disruption or interference in the relationships that the person has with other people. It also affects the person's ability to function on a daily basis. But it's important to realize that just because a person is not functioning that well does not mean that they have mental illness. It's also important to realize, like physical illness, mental illness is also treatable. I think we need to also understand that people go through things, especially now given the times that we've just come from, the pandemic and loss of employment and all the other problems. But our problems affect us differently, and some people's problems tend to take over their functioning. Mental illnesses do not discriminate. Nobody is immune to mental illnesses. Anybody can have a mental illness or a mental disorder. Another important factor to realize is that mental illness does not mean a person is psychologically weak. It just means that their ability to cope has been, interrupted, or they just can't cope with the things that they are going through. So there are different things that cause and contribute to mental illness. But it's also very important that sometimes these factors happen together, or it's a combination of factors, but sometimes it's just one factor that contributes to people having mental illness. The first one being genetics. Let's say perhaps in the family there's a person who has a mental illness, so the people within the family, people who share the same genes as this person, are vulnerable or are at risk to having a mental illness later on in their lives. Brain. Sometimes the chemical imbalances in the brain that might contribute to one getting mental illness. Another thing is built up emotions. That is why it's very important, in whatever way that a person is able to vent, express yourself, scream if you have to, but deal with emotions, because unresolved emotions have the potential to create a lot of psychological distress that leaves a person vulnerable to having a mental illness. Another one is life stresses. I think I've made mention earlier on to the fact that things are happening, people are experiencing things on a daily basis. So life stresses, when a person finds themselves in a position where they cannot deal with the things that they are going through, then it might leave them vulnerable to having a mental illness. Trauma. When a person has been exposed or a person has experienced trauma, it leaves them as well vulnerable to getting or having a mental illness. One might say then what are mental illnesses, or what are the kinds of mental illnesses? So there's quite a few. I'm going to name a few so that everybody gets an idea of what mental illnesses are. We have anxiety disorders, we've got mood disorders, we've got psychotic disorders, we've got personality disorders, we've got eating disorders, and we've got trauma-related disorders, just to name a few. Then the question is, how do I know that I have a mental illness? Symptoms vary depending on the diagnosis or the problem at hand. Some symptoms are mild in nature, and mild symptoms tend to interrupt in a limited way the person's day-to-day functioning. And some symptoms are severe, which sometimes could cause the person to be hospitalized for care. But here are some of the most common symptoms that you might find. But like I said, it depends on the diagnosis that has been given. You might find that, but this one is most common. There's a drastic change in personality and behavior. The person does not do the things that they used to do anymore. Hence, sometimes you hear or you get people say, but you've changed. Then they don't enjoy the things that they used to do. They don't find things. They just almost feels like it's a different new person that you are interacting with. Second one is disorganized thoughts. Extreme mood changes. This is one that sometimes is like a huge red flag that people don't pay attention to. When there is extreme mood changes in a person, when a person becomes irritable, they become angry, they become overly sad, overly aggressive, these are the things to pay to look out for. As well, believing things that are not there. There's also a sense of hopelessness. There is suicidal thoughts. There is just people being demotivated, and many other symptoms that differ diagnosis to diagnosis. People who have mental health issues are going through a lot already. And I think the thing that contributes to the stigma and the judgment is lack of understanding, lack of knowledge as well. So that's why it's quite important for us to educate ourselves and get to a space where we understand what mental health is, because this also positions us in a better space to be able to support those that have mental illnesses and be able to identify if we ourselves have mental illnesses. So we need to move away from the space where we judge and stigmatize people with mental health issues, because you can understand they too are battling with acceptance. They don't understand what is happening to them, and to them it feels like, but my behavior is not normal. That is why it's very important to ourselves and for others, normalize behavior. It is okay. It is okay that a person is feeling sad. It is okay that a person just does not understand what is happening. Validate what you're feeling, validate what other people are feeling. This will help, and it will go a long way in acceptance. Another important thing that we need to take note of, people with mental illnesses are not attention seeking. They are not acting out, and most definitely they are not crazy. We need to shy away from saying a person with mental illness is attention seeking, they're crazy, or they're acting out, because that further perpetuates stigma and makes people not to reach out for the help that they need. A big question is, are mental health issues or illnesses treatable? Yes, they are treatable. What is the treatment? The treatment is therapy. I cannot overemphasize on the fact that people need to stop self-diagnosing. Go is going to make people panic. It's going to make you panic. It's going to make you overthink. So if a person identifies or notices that there are certain behavior traits or behavior things that they do that they wouldn't normally do, or something has changed, go and seek help with a professional registered psychologist. So therapy is effective in treating mental illnesses, but sometimes therapy alone is not effective. So therapy and pharmacology, which is better known as medication, is effective in treating mental illnesses. Do people recover from mental illness? The answer is yes. Recovery can then be understood as living well in the presence or the absence of symptoms. Hope, healing, a sense of empowerment, social connections are key factors in the journey of people recovering with mental illnesses. As I conclude, I just want to say support. If people educate themselves and get to understand what mental illnesses are, it will better position us to support ourselves firstly and support those who might have mental illnesses around us. Thank you for joining us. See you at the next episode. Have a blessed week.